All eyes are on Tennessee's 7th district, but they shouldn't be. It's a ruby red seat that should be a Republican slam dunk. But somehow it isn't. Some people are even saying the race is competitive. Republicans could even scrape it with a single-digit lead. But this is an area that Trump won in November by 22 points. Yet suddenly the GOP is fighting for its life. Republican Matt Van Epps, ex-military, Trump-endorsed, should be a tailor-made candidate for this district. But he's neck and neck up against a progressive activist, Democrat Aftyn Behn. As I say, a progressive, running on affordability, doing lots of national media, but with also a hell of a lot of baggage. Now, our man on the streets of Tennessee tonight is Ben Jacobs, who's written a brilliant piece for Slate today about why this race is so close, what's going on, and he's joining us tonight from Tennessee. Ben Jacobs, who's going to win?
Matt Van Epps is going to win, not to spoil the surprise, Harry.
Yeah.
But the issue is that this is going to be such a tight race and this is going to be so close that the issue for Republicans is not that, they're going to win the seat, but they're going to win the seat by so close. This is a seat Trump won by 22 points. So if you're a Republican in a seat Trump won by 8, won by 10, let alone a seat that was a toss-up, you're not liking what you're seeing tonight.
We'll talk about the political ramifications of the potential fallout and the sort of shouty crackers that we expect will be coming from the Republican Party if, as you say, it's as close as the polls suggesting, as your piece suggested this morning. But just run us through this race. It's a special election because the previous incumbent resigned. Presumably resigned thinking it would be a walk in the park for his party so he could swan off to, I think, is it Ghana or Guyana for his business.
Yes.
So is it the fact that, we haven't seen President Trump down there? We know that when he's not on the ticket himself, there is a reluctance for the Republican vote slumped. We know that Democrats love nothing more, as you so eloquently put in your piece, than coming out to vote against Trump in a special election. We saw what happened in Virginia. We saw what happened in New York. We saw what happened in New Jersey earlier in this month, last month even. The Republicans have been too slow to sort of realise they have a problem here and have been caught with their trousers down, essentially?
I think the Republicans have been a little slow, that this is such a safe seat that I think there's a initial sense of sort of complacency. And if you go back to 2017, 2018, when Trump was president the first time, seats like this were competitive without the same investment. And then you had, going back into even where some that did. And famously, Conor Lamb won a special election in a seat Trump won by roughly 20 points in 2018. That was another big Democratic pickup then. So that there's a basis for this. There's a track record of this, and that this was something that could have been foreseen, that this would tighten, particularly in a district, while it is very Republican, has a strong base of highly motivated Democrats in Nashville.
And talk us through the candidate. As I said, he's ex-military, he's Trump-endorsed. He looks like a sort of Republican from central casting. You'd think he'd be a walk in the park. The Democrats kind of try to make it kind of easy for the Republicans. They've chosen a progressive, someone who's got a lot of Oppo research done on her. She literally said she hates Tennessee and hates country music and hates the food. How has she managed to stay in the race after, essentially, I know that she said she was kind of slightly taken out of context, but the ads write themselves, don't they?
Oh, the ads certainly write themselves. I think Van Epps was the generic candidate, but when you're the generic candidate, Republicans aren't that popular right now. Trump's at record lows, and being generic Republican means there's sort of nothing associated with you, positive or minus. That when you look at past special elections, a lot of these candidates who were Republicans in the Trump first term had real minuses to them. Van Epps is just sort of there. He is the physical embodiment of a generic Republican. Behn, on the other hand, has all these negatives, and the argument the Democrats make is that Republicans are going to call the Democrat socialist, progressive,
regardless,
whatever. But it has much more. It's much more effective when there's actually something there. That you can. Republicans will often say Democrats want to defund the police, but when the Democrat just tweeted it out, that's helpful.
Yeah.
But she is also, has been a strong candidate, has been raising money and sort of dealing with this sort of double-edged swords for Democrats, that you need this to be the three little bears, that if you have too little national attention, you don't have enough money to do anything. If you have too much national attention, then Republicans start to turn out, and just to try to get it to the right level where you have all these Democrats who really want to turn out, who will crawl on broken glass to vote against a Donald Trump Republican, while Republicans are just sitting at home, kind of unhappy, complacent, and not thinking about an election day 4 days after Thanksgiving.
It does strike me that the Democrat candidate, as you say, has been making a lot of noise, being a lot of national media, but also sort of slightly pivoted towards the sort of strategy we saw from Trump in 2024, which is, speaking to at length directly to sort of podcasters, to new media. Yeah. Is that a sort of concession from the left that they've understood and realised that where they went wrong, and actually bypassing the traditional media is actually quite a good tactic? And do you think if she does run this race close, as it looks like she might, we'll seeing a lot more of the progressive wing of the Democrats say, look, actually, no, we can run progressive candidates. It's not just New York, and it's not just the coastal cities where we can win like this. We can win in rural parts of, in red states, inland, with our progressive values. Do you think the Democrats will sort of leap on this one?
I think certainly that that there's nothing Democrats love more than factional warfare. And this would be a good example of that. And progressives will argue, if this is a close race, look, it was close. Whereas more moderate establishment Democrats will know she still lost. That that in a candidate without this baggage, that she's run a campaign where she's sort of not talked about progressive issues. Every ad is about affordability and inflation, and it has the advantage that it's the same message you're giving to toss-up voters as to base Democrats, that people are upset about the cost of living. So that it's not been a progressive campaign. She's not going around holding signs saying defund the police.
Yeah,
she's
no, of
not,
course.
touting sort of every left-wing shibboleth, that it's sort of a message that works broadly. Whereas sort of in contrast, Van Epps has had a little more issues, because Van Epps certainly wants to emphasize that he's Trump-endorsed the Republican base. But as you get to a closer general election, they're sort of de-emphasizing that and running him more as a generic candidate because of the double-edged sword of Trump, that even in a district he won handily, Trump's national opinion ratings, his approval is the lowest it's ever been. This is about where Trump was when Republicans lost that special election in Alabama in 2017, though that obviously the candidate there had Roy Moore had a variety of flaws that Matt Van Epps does not have.
Let's talk about the fallout. How do you see it panning out? I mean, it does seem to me that there's already been, after the November special elections, we saw J.D. Vance very pointedly say, we need to focus on the home turf. I think it was the exact quote, a very pointed intervention on X, buried in one of his 1,000-word tweets, but it was there, very clear to see. We've had lots of MAGA sort of figures, the influencers have been putting the flare up already, saying we need to be focusing more on affordability. Obviously, affordability being that key word that the Democrats were hammering at every opportunity. So as a sort of, we're seeing a sort of appetizer for the midterms and how that campaign's gonna look. How do you think it plays out for Trump in the coming days, coming weeks, if it is as close as you're predicting?
I think if it's a close election, I think the effect is not so much, it's going to certainly be an issue for Trump, but it's going to be an issue for Mike Johnson as well, because the big issue right now for Republicans is they have such a slim majority in the House, and it's an uphill battle to retain the majority in 2026. And at this point, serving the House is really kind of miserable. The majority really doesn't do anything. They don't pass a lot of legislation. Yeah. There's not opportunities for most of what they do is censure each other and name post offices. That if you are a congressional Republican who's looking at, you're going to have to go through a tight race now when you might not have had a tight race before, or to likely be in the minority and to be miserable at a job you're not enjoying in the first place, this is yet another reason not to stick around. That traditionally members of the House who decide to retire, you really see it picking up around Christmas time when they're off. And this is coming right at the point in which a lot of Republicans, we've seen a huge number of Republicans right now, going to look at this and say, do I really want to spend the next 10 months raising money, making phone calls for a race, A, that is going to be harder than I think, and B, for a job I'm less excited about being in than I would be otherwise. And I think it really reinforces that level of dissension among Republicans and makes 2026 look even grimmer.
Yeah, I mean, privately, people are pretty downcast on the Republican side about their prospects. Obviously, there's been the attempt to sort of ongoing attempts to redistrict some areas, but that's slightly backfired, I believe, for the Republicans, is it not?
Yes, it slightly backfired. There's been litigation about this, and it's worth noting that this seat was one Republicans redistricted a couple years ago. That this seat takes in a chunk of Nashville that until 2022, Nashville was one congressional seat that was Democratic, and they split it up into 3 seats. And this, in some ways, is also a display of what happens when the gerrymandering goes wrong. When,
chickens coming home to roost sort of territory.
Instead, and otherwise this would have been a safe Republican seat. And, the math here with what's going on with the redistricting is not looking great for Republicans. They've gone through all this effort for what will be maybe a wash, maybe a net +1 or 2 or 3, not, probably not worth the aggravation. And, to get through all of this and then to see a seat that Republicans won by 20-some points, that is at its bedrock, a safe Republican seat in this kind of trouble is really dispiriting.
The inevitable fallout and post-mortem will come and come back and talk to us as it does. But one thing was very clear, what we haven't seen for a long time is Trump kind of on the road. He's been doing sort of video, video endorsements. He's obviously all over Truth Social. In your piece, you talk about this conference call that he sort of broadcast into a diner, I believe it was, yesterday morning or this week, I believe it was, with Mike Johnson. It was played out, but he hasn't been seen on the stump. Now, in your opinion, would it have been a help or a hindrance in terms of Trump turning up in Tennessee or in nearby, in the state, in the South, or is he deliberately staying away? What's going on there? And will there be an element of blame directed at the president himself for not pulling his finger out in a way that he used to do?
It would have been a huge help for Republicans. And if you talk to Democrats, they admit this. This is, a Republican district, and this is a district where if everyone votes, Republicans win. And the goal of everything we've seen right now is to remind Republicans to vote, because Democrats are already voting. That if you go back to 2018, when there's a similar special election, he showed up in Pennsylvania in Conor Lamb's district, and it moved the race probably about 4 or 5 points. The issue was, at the time, Lamb was up about 4.5, 5.5 points, so Lamb still won. That a Trump rally in this district would have been a huge political asset for Republicans. Yeah. And the fact that it didn't happen, really, that this would have put the race away, that what Trump would have done for turnout, would have upped it enough and created enough earned media and enough sensation that it, would have changed the margins.
Well, we'll see. Lots to discuss. Come and see us again in the fallout. Ben Jacobs, hopefully you don't get too much of a late night as the results come in. Thanks for joining us on Saves the West.
Thanks for having me, Harry.